This programme is brought to you by Big Motoring World, one of the UK's biggest used car supermarkets. For more information and to verify, find out more at bigmotoringworld.co.uk. First today, a quick reminder, the most valuable health advice I can offer right now is to click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Your health is too important to leave to chance, and by subscribing, you'll receive reliable, evidence-based guidance from me every week. Now, this episode's guest is a man who's shaped policy at the highest levels of government and who's danced his way into the nation's hearts. He's a broadcaster, writer and economist with a career that spans Parliament, primetime television and best-selling books. From the Treasury to Kilimanjaro, he brings insight, curiosity and a genuine passion for public life. Welcome, Ed Bowles.
Good to be here, Hilary.
Nice to see you, but not in the GMB studio.
That is true. That is true. I think you undersold Kilimanjaro there. It was Kilimanjaro with Danny Dyer and Little Mix, which gives it a little bit more Ella. And as my daughter says, the Danny Dyer.
The Danny Dyer.
Not the old guy. Danny Dyer from Love Island. So.
That one, of course. A great company. Did you get mountain sickness, altitude sickness?
I did, only in the final few hours. As you know, it was for comic relief. And a couple of the team had like really bad altitude sickness, like they might have to go down. And I was fine until the final climb, when you get, right up to Everest base camp level. And in the final 2 or 3 hours, I, started to kind of get quite unfocused as the sun was rising. I don't really remember the sunrise. And I had to have a test to see if I could carry on. And my kids had said to me, look, they said, if Little Mix make it to the top and you don't. And that was enough to kind of keep me going. And I had a steroid and 2 people walked with me. So I made it to the top. But at the very end, a bit touch and go.
Interesting. It's very unpredictable, isn't it?
Well, they say that it's not related to your fitness.
No, it's not.
It's just something about you. I went to this gym with Danny Dyer about 3 weeks before to do an altitude test, and we were being filmed by the BBC for this, and we were both on bikes with kind of hats and helmets on to get to that low oxygen air. And at the end, they said, Danny, you were brilliant. And they said, Ed, if this was normal life, you would go straight to A&E because my oxygen levels had fallen so fast. And the next morning at 7 a.m, the doorbell rang, and there was the doctor advising the whole trip, who'd arrived at 7 a.m. in his own car with this massive machine. And he said, if you do 3 hours a day for the next 3 weeks, doing preparation at altitude, you'll make it. And if you don't, you've got no chance.
Right.
And so I did all those hours.
Well done.
And I think it probably made the difference. But, I'd assumed, I'm good at climbing mountains. I'm quite fit. Surely I'll be fine. But they said it's nothing to do with that.
It's not. That's right. So you needed to acclimatise. And you've done lots of other challenges physically in your life. You've run 3 marathons.
I've run 3 marathons, and for 2 charities, Action for Stammering Children and a charity called Whiz Kids. And I was doing a fundraiser. I had just left being in the cabinet. I was the children's secretary, did lots of work supporting children with disabilities. And I was invited to speak at a fundraising dinner they were doing, Whiz Kids, the charity. And the head of the charity, Ruth Owen, said, and great news, she said, Ed has agreed to run the marathon next year for Whiz Kids. And I sat there thinking, what? And then people pledged loads of money all around the table.
Back out.
And so she gave me a T-shirt with my name on. And I came out at the end and said, nobody told me. And she said, oh no, she said, but I don't think you'd have agreed unless I did that. So I spent about 3 months in denial and then thought, if I'm going to do this, then I've got to start training. And it's really interesting. You learn so much about, about yourself, but not just how to concentrate and how to stay focused, but also physically, because, if you run that far and all the training you do, you find out your flaw, your injury, where your problem is. And if you manage it, you can do it.
Absolutely. So when was this?
This was 2012, 2013, 2014. So I was Shadow Chancellor.
Were you at the time?
Yeah.
Wow. And was this your first marathon?
First marathon. And this guy had said to me, the guy who was helping me to kind of prepare, said, if you do less than 5 hours, it's a proper marathon. But I had a problem with my knee on the day, and we were about halfway round. Virgin, I think it was Virgin, had put somebody to run with me. I thought this was because, I might be mobbed by, as a celebrity. But no, they said afterwards, I found out.
Or attacked.
This is exactly, as a politician at the time, it was the person who, if they collapsed halfway round, it would be embarrassing for the marathon. So this person, the year before, had done Jade Goody, and the year before Jordan. So I don't know quite why I was in this category. And about halfway round, my knee was really sore, and she started yelling. She said to me, "Do you have any ibuprofen?" I said, "I hadn't brought any." And she started yelling, "Drugs, drugs! Has anybody got any drugs?" I said, "You can't say that. I'm the Shadow Chancellor." But luckily somebody had some ibuprofen, and I just got round in 5:33.
That's not bad.
I know, but it meant I had to do it again because it wasn't less than 5.
Oh, right.
And then the next time, this is a bit stupid actually, Hilary, but I had like really bad flu like a week before, but I'd raised all this money.
Yeah.
And
you'd done all the training.
Did it, and it took me quite a long time to recover. 5:13, final marathon, 4:56.
Well done.
Below
you
5.
Made it.
At that point, I could retire. I was the slowest member of parliament ever to do the marathon, but by far the biggest fundraiser. I raised £160,000 over the 3 marathons. And so I thought, if you're the Shadow Chancellor, you don't have to be fast. No. You've got to be able to raise the money.
Just do it, yeah. But you did it. It's very interesting about marathons because I did a New York marathon as well as a London. And, I try and impart a little secret in this show every episode. And one secret was I had shin splints. I ran my way into shin splints, which is a painful condition of the lower legs.
Yep.
Which makes it even hard to walk. Any weight bearing is agony, and it's like tiny little micro fractures in the surface of the bone. And, I'd taken some advice.
And you didn't know you had that before you ran?
Well, I knew I was developing shin splints.
Oh, you did?
And it was stopping me from doing the last couple of weeks running before the marathon in New York. And I'd invested all this time, and I had sponsorship and money for charity. So I wanted to do it, but I was in pain. So I was told, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, diclofenac, that sort of medicine. And it didn't touch me when I took it orally. And then an expert said to me, take the Voltarol, which is the trade name for diclofenac, intramuscularly.
Does that mean rub it in?
It means injection into your bum.
Injection?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Into your into your gluteus.
Does that work as
maximus.
It's closer?
Nobody really knows why it works. It's the same drug, but it goes straight into the blood system, the circulation, and it's miraculous. It just took away all the pain. I could do my last week's training. I had an injection before the New York Marathon, and I got around without any pain. So just a little secret there to impart to people. If you've got shin splints and it's stopping you running, think about that intramuscular injection.
It's so interesting. I mean, I learned about dehydration, which I don't think I'd ever really, I'd played football and rugby and things, but never, when you were training for so many hours. And to learn that the point when you know you're thirsty is the point when it's too late.
Yeah, you're already dehydrated.
You have to experience that. Yeah. And I would run these training runs, 10, 15 miles and go home and be almost passing out. Yeah. And I've realised that you had to drink earlier. Right. And then ibuprofen was just absolute lifesaver for me. If I took ibuprofen at the beginning and it worked. Yeah. And it's I think in my life I'd always thought ibuprofen was for headaches, but actually it gets you through physical challenges.
Yeah, and it's good for DOMs as well, a delayed onset muscle stiffness that you get the day after or 2 days after the long run.
Right.
So that's helpful. But it's really interesting. And how are your knees now? Because you felt it in that first marathon.
So I felt it in the first marathon, and but I didn't. I just thought it was like a one-off. And actually what had happened was I've got like a soreness in my left ankle, and what they said was in adjusting your gait to deal with your left ankle soreness, that put stress on the knee, and that's what caused it. Yeah. That's all fine. But then in the pandemic, when we were all trying to get back to exercise, and I'd got a bit bored of going to the golf range on my own, a friend of mine, actually James Pennell, who used to be in the cabinet with me, started off a five-a-side football game. Right. And I hadn't played football for quite a long time. I started again and did a good year of that. And then I did this charity game at Millwall. I should have come off, but I'd scored and thought maybe I'll score a second one. And my knee kind of was really, really bad afterwards for about a week. And in the end, I ended up going through a whole process of going to the NHS, having scans, doing physio. Didn't have an operation. They basically said it's osteoarthritis and overload. But the thing I hadn't realised, what they said was, because you're not strong enough in your kind of hamstrings and your glutes and your kind of thigh muscles, you're putting too much load on the knee.
Yeah.
And so you have to do all these strength exercises. I did them for about 9 months. Got back to playing football, thought I've succeeded. And then about 2 months ago, playing another charity game, my left knee went, swelled up the next day. I didn't even realise. And I'm now in the same process. And what I learned from that was that I thought that doing all those strength exercises solved the problem. And therefore, once I was back playing, I thought, I don't need to do it anymore. I can just stretch and do whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, you learn you have to carry it on.
Yeah.
And so now I know that after I get back playing this time, I'm going to carry on doing those strength exercises regularly.
That's really good advice. The integrity of weight-bearing joints like knees and hips is dependent on the strength of the muscles around them.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's actually your glutes.
Glutes as well. Yeah.
And your hips.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought, I know, but that's up here. What about,
it's all connected.
My knee.
Your knee bone's connected to your thigh bone. You know the song.
I keep saying, I know, but shouldn't we do something about my knee? And they said, no, the knee is the symptom of the problem. Yeah. And the problem actually is happening elsewhere. Yeah. And you're basically overloading. Yeah. And the osteoarthritis, which I think you probably, at my age, you get anyway, just gets is made worse by the pressure.
The cartilage tends to wear away, exposing the bone underneath. Talking of
both of the meniscus, which is meniscus on the inside of the knee on both of them.
Yeah, well, you got meniscus on both sides of the knee,
but it's the inside which is sore.
It usually gets worn anyway. Most. Yeah. Did you ever play five-a-side against the Tories? I mean, was it? I mean, because the news teams from the world of television, ITN used to play the BBC news teams and Sky, and I just wondered if there was any political rivalry.
Interestingly, no. For whatever reason, the rivalry was between the political team and the press. I never played a football match against the Conservatives. We had one cricket match, which I was involved in organising, Labour versus Conservative. But people were quite, but we don't do that. That's not what's done. We did it once. I'm not sure it's ever happened again.
Who won?
We did. John Redwood had all the kit.
Right.
But less ability than style.
Oh, okay. You can always tell a sportsman wearing the new kit. They probably never played in their lives.
That is true. But the press game was a brilliant match. And the problem, the press game against the MPs against the press or political against the press would happen on the Sunday morning at the start of the party conference. And then the Conservatives would have theirs a week later. And because I was in the cabinet, Andy Burnham was in the cabinet, all the media would come along. You learn something really important about photography. You can have 20 photographers behind the goal. If they're going to take, 1,000 to 5,000 pictures. If they're taking a picture of Wayne Rooney, they're looking of the 5,000 for the one which makes him look best, because that's the best photo for the sports pages. But if you're a politician, you're going to make of the 5,000, the worst picture is the one they're looking for, because that plays to that caricature. So some of the photos on Monday mornings at the Labour Party conference of me and Andy Burnham were unbelievable pictures. I mean, we looked absolutely terrible. I mean, I just think it was, the lens can lie. I mean, I was never that overweight.
No, they're unforgiving, aren't they? The rest, they're unforgiving. Talk of Andy Burnham, I did the Great North Swim with him at Lake Windermere, and I finished my swim. It's a mile in very cold water. Yeah. And I finished, and I saw his wife and said, "Where's Andy?" She said, "Well, he's not back yet." I said, "He's not back yet." He said, "Well, another hour went past, and finally he arrived." He doing? I don't know.
He probably stopped to do an interview.
He may have done. We think I thought he drowned, but luckily he's all right. Going back to your arthritis, is it just your knee that's affected?
Well, so I had no idea that it was arthritis in the knee. I just thought, I'd hurt them, I'd damaged them. But I think probably it's a bit kind of annoying to find out. They say, really, you just, your age, this is what happens if you don't do the strength exercises. Yeah. But my hands, I have, in my kind of joints in my fingers, I have a swelling, which is the same as my mum has always had since, her 40s. And so that one feels more obvious. And
which joints are we talking about? The distal ones? The ones right at the end?
Yeah, the ones closest to the nail.
Not the knuckles.
And both in the little fingers and both in the and I also am now getting it into my thumbs as well. Well, I think that's partly because of bad rugby playing. And I play the piano and took that up 15 years ago. And I think that helps to keep my fingers moving. And I also have like a squeezy ball I squeeze.
Just hold your hands up to the camera there. We're talking about those distal joints, and you can see those little nodes either side of those joints. They're called Heberden's nodes. So what you're demonstrating there is typical osteoarthritis in the hands.
Right.
And that's characteristic. So rheumatoid affects the other joints in the hands,
as in these ones
the knuckle joints. Yeah.
So if I'm getting a bit in here,
in the thumb. That's right. The base of the thumb.
Is that like to be rheumatoid?
No, osteo.
That's osteo there as well.
Base of the thumb and the distal.
I see. So that and that is
osteo. So that's probably connected to your family history with your mum and your knee.
I don't think it stops me doing anything.
No, and keep them moving, because they're not weight-bearing joints. You want to keep them moving, keep them warm.
What I've always wondered is there something I could take or do?
Well, you could take anything that feeds the cartilage, such as glucosamine, chondroitin, keeping the hands warm, exercising, squeezing a squash ball or a tennis ball, and playing the piano. Carry on, don't stop.
And would the those supplements help my knees too?
Yes. Absolutely, and so they certainly won't. There's evidence that these things do help. They feed the cartilage, which otherwise gets worn, and they certainly can't do any harm. So I would recommend those things.
We often on the television, when we're doing GMB, say to guests that by coming in and raising this issue, there will be hundreds of thousands of our viewers whose lives will be different now. They'll change their behaviour because of their learning. And coming on your podcast, it's going to change mine, because I'm now going to go and take these supplements because I've been told by Dr Hilary to do so. So that's great news.
There you go. We'll take a short break there. Now, this podcast is brought to you by Big Motoring World, one of the UK's largest used car supermarkets. Big Motoring World checks vehicle pricing regularly to give you their best price guaranteed. And with their new finance package, you can get a rate as low as 9.9% APR, 11.9% APR representative. With a wide choice of vehicles and a focus on customer service, Big Motoring World supports drivers through each step of the process. Their stated aim is to be, in their words, big on what matters to you. Search bigmotoringworld.co.uk to verify and to find your nearest store. That's bigmotoringworld.co.uk. I think it's important for people to talk with evidence about an experience, a health experience. I mean, for example, 2 weeks ago, I had my left hip replaced.
It's unbelievable. You are so nimble this morning. I mean, seeing you getting up and out of the settee a second ago, I would have thought this was.
Thanks, Ed. I mean, one of the reasons I can do that was because I was fairly fit to start with, and because I didn't leave it too late, which is a mistake people often make. By the time they've been having a lot of pain for a long time, or been on a waiting list for a long time, the muscles have already become weak, so the rehab is longer. If you start off with fairly strong muscles, you rehab quicker, and as long as you're careful and you do your physio, which is as important as the surgery itself, you can get back. And I use the patient choice thing under the NHS, which people don't know enough about. But this podcast isn't about me, it's about you. And I want to talk about stammering because you went, from after your political career, you've done many things, but you're a regular presenter on GMB now, Good Morning Britain, and you've overcome stammering in your life. You've become patron of the British Stammering Association. So what was your journey like? How did you overcome it? Did it set you back? When did it first start, and what have you done about it?
Well, the first thing to say is that it's never gone away. It's always there. Doing this podcast, I'll stammer during it, and the same when I'm on the television. But I found the way to manage it. Although the honest truth is that when the editor of Good Morning Britain asked me whether I'd like to come and do some shows back in, I think, 2019, I said no, because I didn't think it would be possible even then to deal with the autocue. And so it's been, a challenge. It still is. Every show, it's a bit of a challenge because it's not easy for me to take the reading of the autocue into speech. But it all goes back to being in the cabinet actually. I didn't find out it was a stammer until I was already a cabinet minister.
So you didn't have it as a child?
Well, I did, but I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
And when I was in my teens, I would go to like the school debating society, and I really wanted to do it well. But sometimes I found it kind of hard to get the speech to come. Sometimes, and I thought, well, am I nervous? I don't feel nervous. But then through my kind of 20s and 30s, before I went into elected politics, I didn't have to do much public speaking. And so it wasn't really an issue. And but then when I got selected as a member of parliament, I did my first Newsnight interview late at night down the line, which means, I'm in some car park in West Yorkshire talking to the interviewer in the studio, and hard for me to get the words to come. And when I was in a junior minister, I would regularly have these moments where I would kind of freeze like that, and I couldn't get the words to come out. And was it a breathing problem? Was I nervous? I learned things which would help me to be better. I like familiarity. I like to be able to imagine the place I was going to and feel like I'd been there before. I needed to be calm. But then in my first education questions, so I was the Secretary of State for Children, Schools and Families, doing my first questions in Parliament, and I had to read out some text, and I found it hard to read the text. And one of the Labour backbenchers really loudly, it was Gwyneth Dunwoody, said, he's supposed to be the Secretary of State and he can't even get his words out. And it kind of echoed round. And I went back to the department and said, this is such a problem. And a brilliant woman who worked with me called Francine Bates went off and came back 5 days later, and she said, read this. And it was on the British Stammering Association website. She said, you've got a stammer. I said, I haven't got a stammer. I don't stammer. I think in my mind, I always thought a stammer was where you stammered because you couldn't manage to be fluent. But actually, loads of people with a stammer, including King George VI with his stammer, they have a stammer which is more like a block. It's called interiorized. So the analogy is an iceberg. There's a little bit of iceberg above the ocean, which people see, but not quite sure what it is. It doesn't really sound like anything. Underneath is this massive turmoil of the block. And if you don't know what to do about it, you just freeze. And that was what was happening to me. And so they said that I needed therapy. And at the time I said, well, I can't have therapy. I'm a cabinet minister. Cabinet ministers don't have therapy. But they said, honestly, I think you should. And I met a brilliant therapist called Jan Logan. I spent 3 years with her once a week. She said to me, I do a class. There's 10 of you. It will get worse before it gets better. And I said, well, one, I can't do it in a class because I'm a cabinet minister. I just can't. And two, I said, it can't get worse. And but from the beginning, we started to talk through my my strategies for dealing with it. Very NLP and neuro-linguistic programming, being able to imagine the environment in which I wouldn't stammer, knowing the things which would cause me to, lots of things like, if I'm going to speak in a room, I need to go in and be there for 10 minutes before and feel as though I'm part of it rather than an outsider. But she said to me from the beginning, she said, until you are public about this, it won't get better. Interesting. And I said, but I can't be. And she said, honestly, that is the key. The point at which you start to make it part of normal, the point at which you say, this is part of who I am, will be the point when the pressure will start to recede and the blocks will go away. And until you're at that point, it's going to be hard to really progress. And I spent 2 years thinking that wasn't possible. Yeah. And then in the end, I took that step, and it was the best thing I ever did. And it's been a very important part of dealing with it ever since. The charity work I do with Action for Stammering Children, talking about it. But, on Good Morning Britain, the editor, Neil Thompson, Susanna Reid, who I is my normal partner, they both like us to talk about it because I think they think it's really helpful for, of course it is, kids and parents. Absolutely. But it's massively important for me because the talking about it is a big relieving of, it means I'm not concealing, I'm not trying to cover up. And so it's, it's been quite a journey.
But it was a brave decision to go on national television and talk in front of millions of people.
Yeah, kind of. Although, I spent 3 years in the cabinet. I was doing media all the time, a shadow chancellor for 5 years. The thing I found out when I was in the cabinet was that it was very hard at that time for me to read text. So therefore what I would do is we would write all my speeches, 3, 4, 5,000 word speeches, 40-minute speeches, and I would then basically learn it. Yeah. And then stand up without any notes and then deliver in a kind of fluent, quite colloquial way.
Which was easier.
But actually I could hit, every sentence. I very quickly be able to do that. But if you put it in front of me on an autocue as Secretary of State, I couldn't do that. And slowly, as I became more confident, I started to be able to use text a bit more. But I think, so with Good Morning Britain, when they asked me to do it, it's quite intimidating, the idea of doing 3 hours national television anyway. Put that to one side. The chat, which we might have about a subject, easy. Talking to somebody who's talking about something important and asking them questions, fine. But the thing which worried me was if I had to look into the camera and deliver the news headlines, would I be able to do that?
Right.
And that was, the thing which at the time I felt I couldn't. And even now, every day on social media, there'll be somebody who's saying, Ed Balls, why can't he read the links properly? But the truth is, it's part of who I am.
Yes,
if they want me to come do Good Morning Britain, which they do, it's because I bring a whole bunch of stuff, but part of that is that every now and then I can't quite get the link, and quite often what I do, I see something, I know I'm not going to be able to say it that way. Okay. So I rewrite them in real time. I can't start a sentence with an H. That is an absolute disaster. So having thought that I could, I learned that I couldn't. So therefore you just have to turn things around. And I do that now so much in real time. But the important thing, Hilary, is that if I feel a block, which I do in this discussion with you, I basically ride it. I know that if I relax, I'll come out of it and I'll carry on.
Interesting.
And what for me used to feel like trauma, for everybody else is pretty unnoticeable. And even more so now. And in the early period when I was covering it up, because I felt the trauma, I showed that in my face, in my eyes, in my body. And that was what was destabilizing to people. I remember standing on the green with BBC reporters and I would block. And I would look at them and they would look at me and they was like, I'm like, is he ever going to speak again? Whereas now I know that if I block and I can ride a block really well.
And it hardly shows, you come across as very fluent, very eloquent and you are very popular. Our audience the GMB audience are not stupid. They know who's a nice guy. And I asked you once, didn't I, on the show, after the show, I said, have you ever thought about going back into politics? Because we've seen headlines recently, so there's so much distrust in politicians across the board. It often seems to me that politicians who've been in politics and have come out have become more human because we get to know them. We've got to know you. Would you ever be tempted to go back into politics?
Well, so being in the cabinet, the responsibility of it, I was in charge of child protection and responsible for all the schools in the country in the challenges they were facing. It was the best thing I ever did and the hardest thing, and all those years at the Treasury. So it's hard for anything to be as difficult and as challenging, as fulfilling as that. So which is why, I could never say, I wouldn't want to do it again, because of course I would. However, in life you move on. And I was there for 20 years and then I lost my seat. And I talked to Michael Portillo, who had lost his seat in 1997, the former Conservative cabinet minister. He, of course, went back into Parliament after he lost and spent another 8 years in Parliament, and before he became a full-time broadcaster. And he said it was such a terrible decision for me. He said, I was trying to set the record straight, prove them wrong. I was trying to remake the past. And I made this decision that that wasn't what I was going to do, and that I would go on and do new things. And so I've not sought in any way to go back, and I don't think of it like that now. And what we do on Good Morning Britain, I mean, we are talking to the voters, people who are Labour, Conservative, Green or Reform, who are going to make their minds up, and they will decide the future of our country in their votes. And the conversations we have are not so different from the conversations I might have knocking on doors when I was an MP or a candidate on a Sunday morning talking to voters. And so to be able to listen and to explain and discuss, those are the things which good democracies do, so that people can make good decisions.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do on Good Morning Britain. So I think to myself, I have a different way now of being involved in, public service. And, it's not my job to tell people to vote one way or the other. But what we do is we make sure that people
open up the discussion
and see the issues, and we put all politicians under pressure. So I think that is in a different way of fulfilling thing. The hard thing is, when you're in politics, it's always felt to me like there's this big thick prism of glass between politicians and the public. And it's very hard to see through that prism. And so, I mean, the truth is politicians are human beings, and most of them want to do well and to do a good job, and they worry about their kids, and they worry about the future of the country, and they probably worry about whether they're going to be able to go on holiday this summer and where they're going to go, all the things we all worry about. But nobody sees through the glass to the reality of that humanness. They see politician, not like us, bit weird, out for themselves. When you step outside of politics, like I did, I think the glass goes. And people then are able to see you. And so lots of people, I mean, I cannot tell you how many times people have said to me, are you Ed Balls? And I say, yes. And they say, weren't you a politician? I say, yes. And they say, I used to really hate you, but I don't anymore.
That's nice.
Or, it's great to see, I know you're a politician. It's great to see that you've now become a human being. And you think, well, I always was.
Absolutely.
But I think on the one hand, it would be arrogant of me to think that if I went back into politics, I could do it without the glass. Because I have a feeling that people would see politician again. But also, I think from the outside, being able to talk about, politics and what it's really like is an important thing to do. I really worry, are we going to inspire the next generation of 21, 25, 30-year-olds to go and be politicians? I think at the moment, who would want to be a politician? What a terrible life! All the exposure, all the distrust. But in a democracy, if the good guys don't want to be the politicians, who ends up getting elected?
Absolutely.
And a democracy requires us to inspire people to go and do those jobs. And if I can try and do that from the outside, that feels like a different purpose.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Michael Portillo regretting his decision, and he went on to make some great train journey programs. You've gone on to make some great programs outside of politics. You did Strictly and did very well. You got to week 10. Did you enjoy that?
I loved it. And it was the most crazy decision. When they asked me, I was definitely going to say no. And then my wife, Yvette Cooper, who's now the Home Secretary, but at the time she was backbencher, she said, why would you not go and do it? It's the greatest show on television. We watch it every week, and think how fun it would be. And politics is so wild. So, and you don't want to go back to that. Go and do this instead. And so I thought, well, she's telling me to do it. And I then spoke to Jeremy Vine. He said to me, most fulfilling thing I ever did. So I went in. I was a bit cautious to begin with. I said, I don't want any sparkles. I said, can I only do ballroom? And they said, that isn't really the show, actually. You have to do Latin as well. And the first week, they dressed me in front of Westminster Bridge. That was the backdrop to do this waltz in a suit. And I was so tense.
Did you think, what have I done?
When they say, dancing the waltz, Ed Balls and his partner, Katya Jones, and you stand there thinking, how did I do this? Why did I decide to do this? I felt like, and then I thought after the first week, if I don't let go and go for this, I'm going to so regret it. And also, I think one of the things which is really interesting about in politics, I mean, look, television is always a performance, but you play you on television.
Yeah.
And I play me now.
Yeah.
And when I was a politician, it was me. But when you are in something like Strictly, or if you're an actor on the stage or a film star, what you do is you put yourself to one side.
Yeah, you play a role.
And you play a role.
Yeah.
And I'd never done that in my life. And I didn't know how to do that. I'd never even thought that that's what I would do. So my first week, I was me. And what was he doing there? So the second week, I played the banjo in a Texan Charleston. And then I was the mask. And I suddenly realized, if they put me in a crazy suit with a green face, I could put myself aside and just commit to this.
Yeah.
And then my partner was Katja Jones. It was her first year. She was utterly brilliant choreographer, but she really wanted me to succeed.
Yeah.
And she said, you've got to put yourself aside and just
well done. Yeah.
give them what they want.
Yeah.
And it was a massive, I mean, I learned so much about performance.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that, because when I did Dancing on Ice, I remember that I went from not being able to stand up on skates to doing a routine with Alex, and you know, the moment we were going to skate out of the tunnel on that first evening, I thought, what have I done?
Why?
I've forgotten everything. Can I do this?
On television.
Millions of people are watching. It is scary, but a great challenge to do. And I think your Gangnam Style, it was voted the best TV moment of 2017.
It was unfortunately, we were nominated for the BAFTA, and we were just pipped by the snakes chasing the iguanas, or the iguanas chasing the snakes on that fabulous David Attenborough show. But I think it's absolutely up there in the best Strictly moments. It was the week that Donald Trump was elected for the first time as president of the United States, and I was, I, the former politician, was in leisure wear, doing 40 hours practicing a salsa, but I think it was kind of what the nation needed that night. And I then did the tour, so I did an arena tour.
Fantastic,
it was absolutely amazing. Although, go back to our earlier conversation, 1 week. I was in Nottingham, actually. Our first number was this hairspray group number. I go out. We run out with the 8 of us who were the non-professionals to do this routine. And as I did my first move, my knee screamed at me, and I thought, for the first time in the last 5 months, I'd forgotten to take my ibuprofen. And so it was the most painful routine I had. And I'd learned from the marathons, if I took ibuprofen an hour before, I could get through anything. And I didn't that day.
Okay. But you kept smiling.
I kept smiling.
And you're quite musical anyway. Yeah. You've played with Harry Hill. And,
I did.
And so you played violin at school, was it?
Played the violin at school.
And you piano now?
Piano now. I started the piano when I was in my 40s, and I totally love it. And the Harry Hill and Frank Skinner, the BBC rang and said, would I like to learn to play the banjo to play live at the Royal Albert Hall for the Queen's birthday? And I thought, really? I mean, my life has had some surreal turns, but that was the most surreal. And but a member of the George Formby Society came down from Blackpool, gave me 4 lessons. We played with 40 of them, this live show. And it was when I'm cleaning windows.
Yeah.
And
standing on the corner of the street.
I mean, the really emotional thing was that George Formby was a great sort of inspirer of the nation in the early 40s during the Second World War, which is why the King and his daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, are big George Formby fans. So at the end of the show, after we'd done our number, we were waiting to go back for the encore, and I was standing next to the Queen, our late Queen, and she said to me, I was so moved by the George Formby number. She said it was so special to me.
Lovely.
And we had done that. And then the Prince of Wales, now our King Charles, said to me, Eddie said, what on earth are you doing with your life? And I why? The last time I'd been with him was discussing education policy in the cabinet, and now I was playing the banjo for his mum's birthday. And I had no answer. I said, I don't really know.
So can you do I'm leaning on the lamppost at the corner of the street in case a certain little lady comes by?
Oh, me. Oh, my.
Is that ukulele? Ukulele? That was ukulele, yeah.
It was, yeah. It's called a banjo ukulele.
Have you ever heard the National Ukulele Orchestra?
Well, I've actually heard quite a lot of threshing, but I've never heard that, though.
Oh, they're absolutely brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I would recommend anyone to go and see them.
Frank Skinner is a massive banjo player.
Is he?
Or banjo ukulele player. And they have these meetings in Blackpool where you go up for the weekend, and it's called a thrash. And it means you have like 40 or 50 players who just all play together, and it's a wild noise.
I bet it is.
And that's what we did. It was
Fantastic.
it was a when I'm cleaning windows thrash.
Fine. Well, look, we could talk forever, but there's one final question that I do want to ask you, and that is our NHS.
Right.
You know, I've got my own views on it, but you know, where do you think we're going with it, and do you think it's salvageable?
I think that it is the best insurance policy in the world, and I think we will salvage it, and I think we have to. I think in every generation, there's a moment where we debate, can it be done? And when I was at the Treasury in 99, 2000, 2001, waiting times back then were very long for for routine operations. And we were going through this debate at the time, could it be saved? And we had a big long expert report by a guy called Derek Wanless. We raised national insurance, employees and employers. We put a big chunk of money in 2001, 2002. And over that next 8 or 9 years, huge rise in patient satisfaction, big fall in waiting times. We combined it with really important reforms, as you were saying, that idea of managed choice, so that you say to people, let's use all our excess capacity so that if there are places available in another part of the country and you're willing to make the journey, you can do that. Really good thing to do. We had contestability between the way commissioning was happening to drive the best outcomes. And part of our challenge again is we haven't put enough money in the last 15 years. We've had huge crisis of a pandemic. I think that actually the health service became rather centralised under the last administration. After the Lansley reforms were ditched, I think they tried to control it a great deal from the centre. And so we're having that debate again, can it be saved? And of course it needs to change. And of course you need reform. And but it also needs resource. We need more doctors. We need to improve the state of the buildings. We need to use IT better. But in the end, if we rip this up and try and go for a different model, would we end up with something which is cheaper? I think the evidence is it would be more expensive. Would it be universal? I think the danger is that there'll be people who start to fall outside the net. Is it possible to get the best quality care within a national health service? I would say yes, but it's really hard. And at the moment we are, in one of those debates about whether it can be done. I believe it can. Yeah.
And of course, right now we're debating whether, resident doctors, should be going on strike or not. I mean, it's really, if you compare our health service to European countries, there's probably more doctors per head of population, happier to work less, but for probably less pay as well. It's a really interesting situation. I hope there isn't a strike, but I do understand the pressures that resident doctors are under, earning not much more than minimum wage sometimes, or twice minimum wage.
We know that their pay compared to similar professionals has fallen progressively behind over a long period of time. But at this point, you can't reverse that all in one go.
No.
And there was a good settlement last year, and we can't take people for granted, and that's the challenge for the government. But at the same time, you have to put patients in their care first.
Sure.
And so I hope they don't go on strike. And I think for the NHS, it would be a very bad outcome, and I think it's not in their interests. But we have to show people that we believe in the National Health Service,
sure,
and we believe in their careers and their futures. And that is the government's challenge.
Best thing a socialist government ever did was to introduce the NHS in 1948, before which people died because they couldn't afford any treatment privately. And interestingly, before 1948, 9 out of 10 doctors voted against having an NHS. An incredible fact.
That is true.
Because they had their own self-interests.
But I think a very important learning I have, and I think it's important on our programme as well, that although when reforms are introduced, they're often contested and controversial, the things which last the things which then become consensual, which become accepted across parties. And, I was in the Treasury when we introduced the national minimum wage. It ended up with George Osborne, the Conservative Chancellor, boasting about raising the minimum wage, even though the Conservatives had been against the minimum wage back in 97, 98. The independence for the Bank of England, contested, now consensual. And the National Health Service, I mean, there have been periods when it's been contested, but actually, I think it's consensual.
On the whole, it's beloved, isn't it? So.
Yeah. And I don't think at that point when David Cameron, as a Conservative Prime Minister, put on a poster, cut the deficit, not the NHS, I thought we've succeeded, actually, because in 2001, when we were making the argument for the tax rise for the NHS, we were genuinely thought, is this the point in which the consensus about the NHS is going to break, the post-war consensus? And I think it was rebuilt. And I don't think politics is going to pull away from a National Health Service.
You mentioned George Osborne briefly there. You do a podcast with him.
I do. Political Currency.
How often? We
do it every Thursday. And then we also do a question session, which comes out every Monday. Although if you're a subscriber, you get it a bit earlier. So twice a week. And it's fun. It's quite liberating. When I'm on GMB, I'm asking the questions. Yeah. But when we're on the podcast, we have to sort of, and answering them, and also, but we disagree sometimes, and especially about the past, fiercely. But also, we find lots of things where we you're
in common.
Will agree, and that's a good thing. That's how societies succeed, by finding ways in which people can agree. And I think in the moment in our politics, things have become polarized, and polarized not just in kind of parties pulling away from each other, but a view that if I don't disagree with everything the opposition does or the other side does, I'm not being true to who I am.
Sure.
But actually, that's such a destructive attitude, and that isn't how politics works. Politics succeeds when we agree. Agreeing is okay.
I think people like that occasionally when you agree.
Yeah.
Finally, I'd just like to say thank you for giving me a lovely quote from the last book in my trilogy, Under Darkening Skies, published by Mountain Leopard.
When is it actually?
31st of July.
Oh, so just about to come out.
Just about to come out.
But I read it.
Thank you.
When I was on holiday at Easter, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I gave you a preview copy.
You did, and it was so good.
Oh,
that I thought,
Thank you.
I thought they've not asked me for a quote, but I'll give it anyway, and it's made it onto the cover. So there we are.
As good as your book, Appetite.
Very well. I think mine is not as literary as yours. Yours is well written, but obviously in a kind of crafted way. Whereas actually, to go back to the conversation about stammering, the two books I've done, both of them are entirely spoken. I don't write any words.
Okay.
I turn on a tape machine
and dictate.
And I speak for an hour, have it transcribed.
Brilliant.
And then edit and tighten. But actually, so it makes the style of it less literary, but much more sort of colloquial, more spoken.
Yeah. Well, look, we haven't even mentioned your expertise in the kitchen, which we probably don't have time to do now. But thank you so much, Ed, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've talked about everything under the sun, and I'll see you in the studio soon.
Definitely.
Thanks very much, Ed. Now, don't forget, you can watch all my interviews on the Dr. Hilary Show YouTube page, including my recent conversation with ankle and foot surgeon to the stars, Professor James Calder. But when you've got somebody like Neymar lying on your operating table, or Gareth Bale, these people are probably the highest paid athletes in the world. I think Neymar was transferred from one club to another for over 250 million in 2017. Now, you're operating, you're a foot and ankle specialist. You're operating on these guys. What's going through your mind as you take the scalpel up in your hand?
Most of them nowadays understand that if you push people back too quickly, you may be all right, but it can be an unmitigated disaster. Yeah. And there was an NBA player a while back who had an Achilles tendon rupture, and when I was asked how long it's going to take to get him back, I said, "Yeah, it'll be about a year." So he's about to sign a $350 million contract, $70 million a year, and he was not going to play for the first year. In fact, he was out for 14 months, so I was 2 months short.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Take a moment and do it now. Make sure you catch the next episode where we'll keep exploring the issues that matter most to you and your health. And for more information and show notes on all our programs, go to drhilaryjones.com.